Tarkastetaan, että ääni kuuluu. Ilmeisesti hyvin kuuluu. Loistavaa.
Checking that you can hear me.
Halo. Halo.
Hello, hello. Juu, toi kuuluu vähän huonommin toi mikki.
Halo.
Noniin, nyt kuuluu vähän paremmin.
Nyt kuuluu.
Joo, nyt kuuluu paremmin.
Onko täällä suunnilleen kaikki paikalla vai onko monta vielä ketä odotatte? Nyt kuuluu vähän liian kovaa.
Pretty much everyone here, or are we still waiting on someone?
Tervetuloa Aalto yliopiston ylioppilaskunnan edustajiston kokoukseen 7/2.
Welcome to our meeting, 7/2022, Monday, 12th of September, 2022, 5:18 p.m. opening meeting.
Siirrytään kohtaan 2.
Closing item 1, moving to item 2.
Ja läsnä olevien jäsenten ja varajäsenten toteaminen.
Recording the members and deputy members of the council who are unavailable, disqualified, ineligible, resigned, and present. Antti Ilmavirta, acting as a secretary, will now perform the roll call. Antti.
Kiitoksia. Ensin ilmoitettakoon edustajistollekin, että Julia Alajoki on eronnut edustajista.
To announce that Julia Alajoki has resigned the council.
Minulla ei ole sitä tietoa, minulla ilmoitettiin vain asia näin.
I do not know why. It was just informed to me.
Kokoomuksesta mulla on läsnäolijoiksi ilmoitettu.
From Aallon kokoomus, the following person have said that they will be present.
Onko muita Aallon kokoomuksesta?
Sirana Karen, are others from kokoomus, Aallon kokoomus present. And next Kem.
Tunkelo. Reunanen. Ja onko Anttila vielä? Yes, eli myöhässä. Näin oli ilmoitettukin.
Yes, Anttila is running late, as was announced.
Koponen. Kainulainen. Ailinpieti. Muita Kylterirengas ykkösestä? Ei ilmeisesti muita. Kylterirengas 2, Perttula, Veiste, Niemi, Yläpoikelus, Nissinen ja Niemi ja Nikola. Kiitos. Luja ei ole ilmoitettu läsnä olevia, onko paikalla kuitenkin?
Is anyone from Luja present? Apparently no. Luova.
Saikku. Onko muita Luovasta? Ei muita, asia kunnossa. Skisma, Mäntylä, Pollari, Hyytinen, Stimpert, Sorvari. Kiitos. Vihreämpi Aalto, Regelin, Robbins, Matson. Poissa, selvää. Arstila. Selvää. Aaltio. Pääkkönen. Vihreämmästä Aallosta muita. Korjaan, joo, olihan täällä pahoittelut. Poutanen, Mölsä, Pyhälammi, Ihalainen. Nyt onko vihreämmästä Aallosta vielä muita? Asia kunnossa. Voltti, Fiilman, Kuisma, Voltista muita? Asia kunnossa. Vuoga ei ilmoitettu ja onko silti joku paikalla? Kiitos. Onko joku edustaja paikalla oleva, jonka nimeä ei vielä ole sanottu?
Anyone else present whose name has not yet been mentioned? Apparently no.
Tulleet kirjatuiksi, eli 33
So
edustajaa.
33 members present.
Korjaan edaptori. Eduskunnassa on edustajia.
Representatives present.
Todetaan, että paikalla on 33
Thank you. 33 members represent council present.
Jos joku tulee myöhässä, niin muistakaa sitten
And if someone comes in late,
ilmoittautumaan, niin pysytään
please tell them to come up here to announce themselves so we know how many votes we have here present.
oikeus kaikille AYYn työntekijöille,
And we grant the right to our employees, the OPS personnel and the interpreters the right to be present.
hallituksella ja talousjohtokunnalla.
And also the automatically given to Chief Financial Officer and the board. And the microphone is breaking up a bit. Anyone else would be granted the right to be present or the right to speak?
Ei vaikuta olevan, joten päätetään kohdan 2.
Apparently no, so we can close item 2.
Kokouksen laillisuuden sekä kokouksen
Move to item 3, recording lawfulness and quorum of the meeting.
ylioppilaskunnan sääntöjen mukaan
According to our regulations, we have a quorum if there are at least 25 representatives present.
Edustajiston työjärjestyksen 8. pykälä toteaa seuraavaa. Kutsu edustajiston kokoukseen on julkaistava ylioppilaskunnan virallisella ilmoitustaululla ja ylioppilaskunnan internet-sivuilla 7 päivää ennen kokousta.
Now 7 days prior to the meeting, the invitation.
Kutsu sähköpostitse vähintään 7 päivää ennen kokousta. Kokouskutsu tulee lähettää suomen, ruotsin sekä englanninkielisenä.
And should be sent the invitation in Finnish, English and Swedish.
Jäsentää puheenjohtaja. Lisäksi kokouskutsu on toimitettu 7 päivää aiemmin edustajiston sähköpostilistalle, viralliselle ilmoitustaululle ja ylioppilaskunnan internetsivulle. Nämä ehdot täyttyvät. Todetaan kokous lailliseksi ja
These conditions are met. So the meeting is lawful and has quorum.
Kohtaan 4.
Moving to item 4, election of 2 persons approving the minutes and 2 vote counters.
Valitaan siis 2 pöytäkirjan tarkastajaa, heille henkilökohtaiset varajäsenet. Lisäksi
So we will elect 2 persons approving the minutes and their deputies and 2 vote counters and their personal deputies. And I suggest that we do as before, so that the persons approving the minutes will act as deputies to the vote counters and vice versa. So this means we need 4 names.
ehdotuksia.
Any suggestions?
Kiitos. Muita. Regelin. Eli Ihalaista ehdotettu, onko Ihalainen käytettävissä?
Ihalainen has been suggested.
Hienoa. Sitten vielä 2 reipasta ääntä laskea.
Then we need 2 more, 2 vote counters.
Ihalainen. Onko Regelin käytettävissä? Osu omaan nilkkaan.
Regelin available.
Vielä 1 nimi puuttuu. Houtanen.
Need 1 more name.
Käytettävissä. Erinomaista.
Yes, excellent.
Eli varmistan, että pöytäkirjan tarkastajat Filman ja Ihalainen ja
So Filman Ihalainen
Kainulainen ja
to approve the minutes and Regeni and Kainulainen vote counters and the vote counters and persons approving the minutes will act as each other's deputies. Yes, closing discussion. Filman Ihalainen will approve the minutes. Their deputies are Regelin and Kainulainen and vote counters Regelin and Kainulainen and Filman and Ihalainen will be their deputies. Closing item 4, moving to item 5, confirming the agenda for the meeting.
Lista on teille toimitettu kokouskutsun yhteen.
Been sent the agenda with the invitation to the meeting. Do anyone have anything to add?
Nyt on valitettavasti mennyt ohi kyllä.
And the interpreter cannot hear anything what Filman is saying because they don't have a microphone.
Jälkeen, että saadaan kuntoon seuraavaa.
Some kind of a request.
Ilmeisesti lisättävää ei ole. Yes. So you can't hear my microphone on the... Oh, yes. Yeah, we need to use these when we actually have discussions. But do you hear translation from me? Okay.
Yes, the interpreter is testing. If you can hear me.
Yes, let's hope we can get the translation working. And when we discuss the matters on the agenda, we will have these microphones in the audience so you can hear everybody. Se voisi Allulla vaikka ottaa valmiiksi yhden tästä. Se on nyt tuossa muuten asennossa sitten. Yes, jatketaan kohta.
Testing. Yes, moving on to item 5.
Esittelystä vaikuttamisasiantuntija Fonin läsnäolojärjestelyitä helpottaaksemme esitän, että
To make
käsitellään
it easier for Fon,
kohta 10 kielipolitiikka.
I suggest that we will go through item 10 after item 7, latest news from the central office.
Eli muutetaan ainoastaan järjestystä.
So we just change the order,
Käsiteltäviin asioihin.
put item 10 after item 7.
Kommentteja, joten hyväksytään esityslista kokouksen työjärjestykseksi sillä muutoksella, että kohta 10 kielipolitiikasta käsitellään.
Yes, so we'll approve the agenda, except that we will handle
Suljetaan kohta 5.
item 10 after about language policy after latest news from the central office. Just move to item 6, announcements.
Fiilman, saat mikrofonin.
Kiitos puheenjohtaja.
Thank you. Filman, I'd like to announce that we had the village cleaning bee, and I think it went very well.
Syksyllä, kuten pikkujoulut. Ja toivon kaikkea osallistumaan sinne. Nämä tosiaan oli siis KY:n ja Otahoasin pikkujoulut ja KY:n ja Otahoasin.
And we also have KY:e and Otahoa's pre-Christmas party coming up.
Emil. Seuraavaksi.
So thank you everyone who took part in the cleaning. Thank you, Emil.
Yes. Ilmoitan, että kesän
To announce that during the summer, Tekkari-yhdistys working group put together this survey that was sent to people today, and it's open for 2 weeks, the survey.
Kiitos Visa. Onko muita ilmoitusasioita?
Thank you. Anything else to announce?
Filman, ole hyvä.
Filman.
Meillä on nyt paljon uusia fukseja ja
a lot of new freshmen, a lot of new students at Aalto. So I'd like to bid welcome to all of them. And please come join the representing us activities if any of you are watching. This is very fun. Yes, thank you for this speech.
Tärkeän sanoman.
I'm sure you all heard this.
Hyvä, onko muita ilmoitusasioita?
Anything else to announce?
Ei taida olla, joten suljen aiheesta keskustelun.
Apparently no.
Päätetään kohdan 6 käsittely ja siirrytään
So item 6, move to item 7, latest news from the office.
Tässä kohtaa kysymys sinne OBSiin, että onko tietoa...
Now I'd like to ask OBS, do you know if it is working now?
Joo. Joo, toivottavasti saadaan tulkit mahdollisimman pian langoille. Kohta 7 tosiaan toimiston kuulumisia.
If we can get interpreters online.
Ollikaan esittelee toimiston ajankohtaisia kuulumisia. Ja tuttuun tapaan otetaan kysymykset ja kommentit sitten esitykseen.
And as before, So the questions and comments after the presentation. Thank you.
Edustajisto ja puheenjohtajisto.
Thank you.
Eli toimiston kuulumisia.
So ladies from the office.
HR, vaikuttamisen ja viestinnän päällikkö Laura Luoto on siirtynyt uusiin haasteisiin.
So Laura Luoto has moved on to new challenges.
Käynnissä, ja haku on auki 25.
So we are now recruiting someone to replace her. And it's open till 25th of September.
Lähtien on nyt museojohtaja ja yhteisöpäällikkö, eli hän on ottanut yhteisötiimin esihenkilövastuut, jotka aiemmin on kuulunut toiminnanjohtajalle.
And we have a new supervisor for our community operations.
Meillä Arts edunvalvontaprojektin projektityöntekijä.
Sara Selonen continues as a project worker for our arts advocacy project until mid-October, and Touko Heikkinen will continue as the project worker for the
Sitten yhteisö.
housing regulations. Then about community, autumn's events are underway. There are people on the campus.
Mielenterveyden ensiapukoulutukset järjestetään nyt tässä kuussa. Ja sitten
The mental health first aid training this September. We planned the recruitments for volunteer compositions next year. And also our equality website is now open. There's the address. And about real estate, our portfolio sales are progressing, but a bit slower pace than what we anticipated.
Oikeasti otetaan lopuksi, mutta ihan miten sä haluat itse.
Otetaan lopuksi. Joo. Hyviä uutisia Espoon kaupunginvaltuustossa. Otakaaren asemakaavamuutos meni läpi ja sinne sitten on suunnitteilla yli 800 uutta opiskelija-asuntoa.
So we have the zoning plan is now approved, so we are now planning to have more than 800 new student apartments.
Niihin sitoutuminen tulee sitten seuraavaan edustajiston kokoukseen. Serviniemen perusparannushankkeen esiselvitys.
Then about the renovation, the preliminary investigation for the Serviniemen renovation has now been initiated, and there's a window renovation going on in Otakaari 20. And for Otakaari 18,
viime viikkoina avoimissa ovissa ja siellä on ollut kiitettävästi.
been the open doors there to see these model apartments.
Opiskelijakeskuksesta.
Then about the student center. The construction cost estimate has been increased because the general cost level has increased. We have tried to look for where to save money and also progressed with fundraising together with DF and KY. And the estimates start for the construction has been delayed because of the delay in the zoning and building permit processes. And the busiest moving in day, the 1st of September, is now behind us without any major problems. And also the kiosk for these academic year stickers has been open as well. And when it closes, the stickers can be obtained from the office. About advocacy, the Sula General Assembly material are now going through the comment round. We are starting our planning for our parliamentary election campaign and also went through the results of our interest group survey. We have also forwarded the survey from the Ministry of Education and Culture about the opening of bank accounts for international students, and we already received many responses. Also, board members and our executive director will meet with the AYYE HR committee this Wednesday, and the topic of the discussion is the equality in the student community. I also decided that these non-free study paths that we have opposed will not be used as an admission pathway to get into the Aalto University in 2023. Board asked questions to the Aalto Foundation Board for the community event that will be held on this Thursday. We have asked, for example, about the student community's number of exchange student spots. Also commented on the Aalto's auditing system self-evaluation report. Then about communication.
Ja lisäksi ollaan saatu positiivista medianäkyvyyttä AYYE-järjestämästä verkkoapprosta.
And we also had a positive feedback from our Treat Our Delicacy APRO event. Then on the 19th of September we will have our second Instagram live question hour for the board, where we'll answer on questions that have been sent beforehand. You can find the link to the sending questions in our weekly newsletter. Then we also planned and implemented our autumn's communications. The topics have included events, meal subsidy, new students, and also the upcoming volunteer recruitments. Also, the weekly newsletter has now come back from the summer break. Then about the board, news from the board. We talked about AYYE to our new students during the orientation lectures, met with the Aalto management, talking about this kind of a campus reunion. Then we also had this contest against the Aalto management at Aalto Party. So the thing that we did before the pandemic, for example, we had a tug of war contest, which we won. Then we met with this Ikiteekkari, Forever Teekkari, at the end of August. Talked about the student center and societal advocacy. And yes, we will meet with the AUFB HR committee this Wednesday. And at the end of the week, there will also be the SYL autumn seminar.
Sitten listauksena viime aikoina käsiteltyjä asioita.
And things that the board has gone through.
Erillisopiskelijoita AY:n jäseniksi sen vuoksi, että he ei merkittävästi hyödy jäsenyydestä, eikä me hyväksytä muitakaan erillisopiskelijoita ylioppilaskuntaan jäseniksi. Ja sitten käyty läpi mielenterveyden ensiapukoulutusten käytännön järjestelyitä ja päätetty, että tätä opetus- ja kulttuuriministeriön hankerahaa käytetään myös OPSin laitehankintoihin. Avattu lakitustyöryhmän rekrytointi.
Also opened the recruitments for our student cap ceremony.
Kommentoitu tilavarauskierrosten uudistusta, vastattu opiskelijoiden liikuntaliiton kummikirjeeseen ja
responded to OL's letter.
Asioista. Kommentoitu Suomen ylioppilaskuntien liiton sääntömuutoksia.
Commented on the rules change for SYL. Also heard about the General Assembly material and interviewed SYL candidates.
Tulevaan kokoukseen.
Then for the next meeting we'll also propose changes for the Teekkari meeting regulations. And we also granted AYYE scholarships according to the proposal made by the relevant committee. And then for operating grants, also granted them according to the scoring system. Yes, thank you. And now I think it's time for questions.
Avaan aiheesta keskustelun ja ensimmäisenä Filman puheenvuoropyyntö.
Kiitos herra puheenjohtaja, Filman Votti. Avatko nopeasti salkkumyynnin hitautta, eli mikä siinä on niin kuin keissiä, onko niin kuin kuitenkin kaikki menee hyvin ja koska tämä on oletettavasti saatavissa loppuun?
Joo, se aikataulu on vaan venynyt. Ei mitään dramatiikkaa, että alun perin oli suunniteltu, että se on syyskuun.
Yes, the timetable has just stretched.
So at the moment it seems that it will be at the end of October, the meeting.
Ei mitään semmoisia yllätyksiä, mitkä...
So no big surprises there.
Yes, sitten Poutanen seuraava puheenvuoro.
So next up, Poutanen.
Kiitos. Aloitan työjärjestyksellä.
So I will open up with a...
Oletteko tietoisia, että streamin
do you know that the stream is kind of cutting up? Yes, it's been fixed.
Mun kysymys liittyy...
Then my question proper to Syl, because we are telling that who will go to the delegation
Mille ryhmille ne paikat jaetaan?
and with what groups will get the slots. Do you have any statements on this?
Yes, my next question is about Syl, about the composition, how the seats are allocated. Yes, it will be handled by the board this week.
Kuuluuks? Yes. Ymmärtääkseni Antti voit korjata, jos mä oon väärässä, mutta ensi edustajiston kokoukseen.
Testing, kyllä mulla pitäisi mennä.
Päättäminen.
Joo, pitää paikkansa. Eli 2,5 viikon kuluttua on seuraava edustajiston kokous, jossa edustajisto vahvistaa hallituksen esityksestä SYL-delegaation ja sitten lisäksi ohjeita.
So we confirm the Syl delegation. Next week I also instruct the delegates how to act in the General Assembly.
Kiitos puheenjohtaja. Ehkä vahvistaa, toivottavasti vahvistaa. Joka tapauksessa Syllistä puheen ollen tuossa alkukesästä muistaakseni kerroitte, että Syllillä on tämmöinen joku lausunto tuosta Kelan YTH-terveydenhuoltomaksukeisistä. Onko tämä edennyt mihinkään?
Has this
Tiedätkö
proceeded?
Mitään?
Does AYYE know?
Maksu.
The FSHS payments is the question. I don't know if the FSHS payments have progressed.
Kiitos kysymyksestä. Onko vielä muita?
Thank you for the question. Do we have any other requests for the floor?
Joo, mikrofoni sinne.
So please hand the mic over.
Joo, anteeksi. Haluan kysyä tästä.
So I would like to ask about the mental health service first aid trainings.
Toimisto ja hallitukselle vai?
Is this just for the central office and the board, or is it open for all members?
Sitä on markkinoitu vapaaehtoisille.
It has been marketed for volunteers, and we had slots over in this year's weekly newsletter. There's more information on the subject.
Okei, ei liittynyt tähän. Joo. Että käsittääkseni paikkoja vielä on.
So I think that we still have slots. You can sign up.
Hyvä. Ja sitten tosiaan Poutanen seuraava kysymys.
Poutanen with the next question.
Anteeksi, unohdin kysyä äsken Sylistä myös sen,
I forgot to ask about Syl previously that have we had how many applications to the delegation?
En osaa sanoa, mutta ensi kokouksessa.
I'm not sure, but we should find out in the next meeting.
Mä voin näin epävirallisesti täydentää, että
I may unofficially fulfill so that
päällikön olkapään yli, kun hän
I looked at
siellä tutkaili, niin jos
at the screen when they were being decided if there were people who would be willing to join. It might be that if you sign up, that it might not be a bad idea, especially people who are not going to the Teekkari tradition party.
Hienoa siitä. Mukavaa aikataulutäytettä marraskuun pieneviin iltoihin.
Nice things to do when the nights grow cold and dark.
Niin suljen aiheesta keskustelua.
There are no other requests for the floor. I will close the discussions and move to decide. The decision motion being that the Representative Council decided to record the latest news from the central office. Decided, closing item 7, moving on to item 8, sale of divested properties. Oh no, actually, changing due to the agenda, we are the language policy is the new item on the agenda in this stage.
Joo, ja sen verran tosiaan en pitkästi taustoita, mutta tästähän
I
on
will not
käyty
go into backgrounds
5/22
very much.
lähetekeskustelua.
We had a preliminary debate in meeting 522,
Otetaan taas kysymykset
and
sitten
let's
Presiksen
have the
päätteeksi
questions
sen
at
jälkeen
the end of the
keskustelu.
debate, followed by the discussion proper. First the debate and then the questions.
Eikö nyt se on muted? Ilmeisesti on päällä.
It looks like it's on. Hello.
Toimiiko tulkkaus vielä?
Is the interpretation still working?
Yes. Okay.
Okay. So I will not be interpreting myself at the same time. A good measure. So today I don't have a presentation for you. I came here to present shortly the language policy that you saw last spring. I would remind also about the process proper that we've done.
Tuossa 2021 tehtiin meidän
We did
yhteisössä
a
sellaista
2021
kyselyä ja sitten jatkettiin
survey,
vielä haastatteluilla.
followed with
näiden
interviews,
kyselyiden ja
and
haastattelujen
based on these,
perusteella kokosin sellaisia
I compiled
parhaita käytäntöjä.
good practices.
Siitä muodostui tämmöinen 9-sivuinen oikein
The
akateeminen
nine-page
teos.
academic
Ja,
treatise.
edustajiston
And then the
reaktio oli
Representative Council's
TLDR.
reaction was TLDR.
Joten
So too long didn't
lyhensin
read.
sen nyt
So I shortened it down.
versioon, mitä teillä on siellä.
The version that you
Se
have
ydin
right now.
on kuitenkin siinä.
Core is still
Se
that
ajatus on, että koska meidän arvoihin kuuluu
because
semmoinen
our values
opiskelijaläheisyys,
include being close to the students
ja syrjivien rakenteiden
and
poistaminen,
dismantling harassing
niin
or
sen mukaisesti
segregating
sitten
frameworks. In accordance with this language policy will guide AYYE to make decisions where we will include the minorities in the process and in this good language policy and the process. Am I doing talking about the correct thing here?
Eli tämä on se ydin.
So this is the core of it, starting from the students, dismantling bad frameworks and participation of students themselves. We have a few items where we discussed that maybe we could open this up a bit. What does this mean when AYYE consults in translations or interpretations?
Ja inklusiivisen kielen käytöksessä.
And the use of inclusive language.
Joo, niin se tarkoittaa lähinnä sitä, että
it means mainly that what we've done so far.
Ne asiat, mitä ollaan tehty ja ne on niin kuin havaittu hyödyllisiksi. Elikkä sellaisten niin kuin workshopien pitäminen,
things that we've considered good and useful, hosting workshops. If somebody asks like, okay, how should we handle this? We can guide, we can offer advice and instructions.
Niin, se oli se kohta. Mutta muuten mielellään
otherwise,
kuulen
I'd very much like to hear questions. If you have any questions, I will be more than happy to answer any that I can answer. So, opening discussion. Start with questions first, and then the open discussion will follow. Question about the proceedings, it seems. So we have some sort of problems with the stream picture, that is.
Hyvä, kiitos. Eli jos
So thank you.
Kysyy, että miksei toimi, niin voitte ohjata YouTube-kanavalle siellä.
Why it's not working? You can guide them to the YouTube channel. better.
Joo, kiitos.
Via that. Thank you. Continuing.
Oliko sulla Visa joku myös tähän
Did you
liittyen?
Visa have
Tämä. Ei ollut muita, oliko sitten
something regarding this?
puheenvuoropyyntö? Anteeksi, mun sattui mennä ohi joku.
Somebody else have any requests for the floor? Fielman, yes.
Kiitos puheenjohtaja Fielman Voltti.
Thank you, Chairperson Fielman Voltti. This document is very okay, but an essential question here is that we're going towards inclusion and that everybody can participate. But our language policy is trilingual. Is this something that we wanted to kind of write this kind of a positive? Well, are we actually making essential changes? I didn't actually understand the question. So yeah, I understood from the text it says you can participate in any language. But our offer should be, or our official offer is that of 3 languages. Yes, now I understood the question. That is an excellent question. There are, I'm thinking in the original longer document, I think we had kind of principles of communications include that people will understand language even if it's not perfect. So if you participate in a conversation in like English or a mixture of 2 languages or Pidgin, or with the level of knowledge that you have, people will understand you and they will accept it. So it includes the level that we may and we can be as we are. We can be imperfect. Perfection is not required over understandability. Then we have this item 2.2, including people who are not present but might want to know about it later. I feel like this document will guide that we will use just English in AYYE activities, but is it so that you may can require that we only use Finnish and be able to use Finnish and get by with just Finnish? So it will this. So we were talking about just using Finnish. Of course, probably this depends on the situation. What kind of situation will you have? A situation where we have half English and half Finnish, kind of segregating to only use Finnish. Sorry, I will interject. If I ask, like, please talk to the microphone directly because it will be garbled if you don't speak clearly into the microphone. So when talk about, you said it's not inclusive to use only Finnish. I would like to reiterate that not all people are able to use English in these situations due to several factors. Not all have perfect English skills, or I would feel like it would be unfair to force people to use English, even though the context might be entirely Finnish language context. But I have this kind of worry that this document would guide us in a situation where only knowing Finnish would disqualify you from certain parts of participation. So you are worried that, if I understood correctly, of a situation where everybody will talk English and you would like to be able to only talk Finnish in that situation. Yes. So of course, the document, in my opinion, of course, it's only my opinion, will not lead to a situation where you will not
kun haluaa käyttää.
allowed to use a language that you know when you want to use it.
Katsoisin ehkä, että se on
But I would see
oikeassa
that it is
elämässä aika
in real life it is kind of a rare
Esimerkiksi
situation.
Jos mä olisin sellaisessa tilanteessa,
For example, if I was in a situation where
suomen kielen puhujia mun
would only have Finnish speakers around
ja
me,
joku heistä ei halua puhua
and one of them would not wish to use English in under any circumstances.
Esimerkiksi halua, niin.
For example, like talking about 2.2 using the word form, people who don't want.
Sanotko uudestaan, koska kuuluu tosi huonosti tähän.
To reiterate, unofficial texts or situations, taking into account people who are not present but might want to know about it afterwards. In my opinion, this will guide towards a situation where one must make all the notes in English. All the presentations that might be included might have to be made in English. So this should not, I think that this is not our goal. Thank you for opening. So I would see that kind of documents.
Tällä hetkellä, jos täällä olisi kaikki vaan
if we would have everything in, like just talking Finnish, doesn't mean that somebody wouldn't be on the stream, they would listen in English. It would still guide us to take them into account. Always have 3 languages in these documents. For example, the agendas are in English and 3 languages. So individuals who are allowed to participate, that they can, of course, participate, but it will not guide towards everybody having to use English and not in Finnish. So that's not something that's written. Thank you for the question. We have other requests for the floor. Looks like that would be a no, and no other requests have been made. So if I'm wrong, please do so without further delay. So the motion was that the Representative Council decided to approve of the language policy according to the appendices. Decided. Closing item 8, moving on to item, and actually not to item 9, but a break, a meeting. And let's continue so that we will continue the meeting in 10 minutes, 10 minutes past 6.
Tervetuloa takaisin jatkamaan.
Welcome back from the break.
On täällä suunnilleen hyvä väki saapunut
We have
takaisin pelipaikalle.
About enough people here present, yes.
Joku vielä. Ei näitä puuttua, jatketaan. Siirrytään kohtaan.
Let's continue the meeting, moving
9.
on to item 9.
Hyvä. Siirrytään kohtaan 9. Lähetekeskustelu asumisen ohjeessa.
Preliminary debate about the update for the housing regulation.
Joo, ei mulla oikeastaan muuta.
Yes.
Sampo esittelee hallituksesta ja sitten meillä on
Sampo will be presenting.
Minna saapunut paikalle.
Minna is also here present.
Ja Touko myös. Sorry Touko.
And Touko, sorry Touko, forgot you there.
Ainakin mulle.
Can you hear me? Yes.
Mahtavaa. Yes, tosiaan
So wonderful.
Uudistus. Ja tänään on siis
update of the housing regulation, and we'll have a preliminary debate on the issue.
Onko meillä oikeat slaidit täällä?
You have the right slides here.
Mä laitoin tänään sinne kyllä.
I did place them. Interpreter also noticed that they have the wrong slides. Now I have the right agenda.
Ei taustapresentaatio, vaan
Pieni tekninen häiriö tässä lataan
small technical problem. Getting the new slides.
Tehdään tämänkin kanssa sitten silleen,
cue the elevator music. So let's do so that we'll take the questions after the presentation, then the group speeches, and then the discussion. Other discussions.
Yes, nyt näyttää oikealta slideilta.
Yes, now it looks like I have the correct slides here. Sorry for this slight delay.
Tosiaan tänään lähetekeskustelu ja seuraava.
So today we'll have the preliminary discussion and debate.
Tässä on aluksi
decision next time. So first with
asumistoimintaa nykyisin sääteleviä dokumentteja.
We have some documents that concern our housing currently. It's actually not all of our documents. The strategy includes some points on this as well, but these are the most central and essential ones. Here's what's changing. So we have these housing regulation and the housing other document concerning housing, and those will be changing, we'll be combining them, so we have one document less. We have some changes in graphics.
Ja tosiaan tähän asiaan liittyy aika paljon erinäköistä lainsäädäntöä.
This also includes lots of legislation.
Myös viranomaisohjeita.
Also official instructions. The cities and ARA are the main movers and shakers in regards to officials that regulate this on everyday level. So a few essential points on legislation. The AYYE in Finnish, which is the legislation concerning rental properties, and the other legislation on mutual governance of rental properties. They are being changed in the parliament. We have a good rental manner, which is basically standards from the industry, good practices.
Toimii muutenkin lakikäytäntönä. Ja sitten tosiaan
and acts as a central legislative item here.
Sitten on kaupungit, jotka tarkentaa näitä ARAn.
We also have the cities. We'll further focus on this. Instructions and on some background. Why are we handling this right now? The central reason being that the ARA in its checkup last year has given us a strong suggestion to change it to coincide with their own policies and regulations. So here are the two central or essential pieces of legislation, which sometimes currently conflict with us. In addition, we have certain kinds of problems here present in the process. For example, we have our housing democratic organs of trust have tasks which should be actually done by the renter. For example, dissolving of agreements, disturbances, and some other items. These are legislated and decided by law. Also, because of these, we have lots of waiting periods for our tenants, which are unacceptably long. The essential point here is to make our services better and cut down on needless bureaucracy. We'll move staff housing to HR because it's partially an HR issue. We are looking at this legislative update, which is soon taking place. In addition, largely our scoring system is very much contradictory with ARA's instructions. So we'll try to conform our scoring system with ARA's requirements. In addition, when we have direct quotes from the legislation in some of the documents, which is not a good practice because they kind of go out of date. We also made incorrect interpretations of legislation. So we should actually should link to the law, not directly quote it. So here on the timetables, how this has progressed. We started this update in May, based on the fact that we've only had resources then, which were quite slim. Then we did round in our organs of trust, quite fast, quite quick round in ASU and ATMK, so the housing tenants and the associations. Board has looked at this right before midsummer. Then we also had the July holidays, but after that we worked on this at the same time. We have the second round of commenting for the board, and Takiba, the committee, has commented on this. And now this is up here, right here on the 12th. So we are at the balloon right now. Next up in our October's meeting, we should have the decision. We have one meeting here before the decision making. One central reason why this update is being done is how our tenant democracy is not up to ARA standards and requirements. In order for us to comply with the legislation and be in accordance with it, we must make these decisions before the holidays. Here we have the biggest changes, biggest of which is that we will not quote the legislation, we will link to it. It will be more in accordance with time, and it pertains to how well it represents the current situation. We will remove some items from the regulations and we'll move them to the web pages and internal channels.
säätää ohjesääntötasolla, niin siirretään sitten nettisivuille informaatiota.
Stuff that need not be in the regulations, we will actually do stuff on the web pages.
Yes. Ja sitten tosiaan
then of course on the tenant activities we will move practical instructions away from the regulations and directly send them to the housing tenements and the stewards, castle stewards.
Halunnut ehkä nähdä asumisen linjapaperin
would like to of course see the update of the regulation, but we don't really have the time for that because we need to get these democratic organs of trust changed within the year. It's quite a large task, which is of course regrettable, but and the policy paper will be partly dated and will partly conflict with the other documents, but we will update it afterwards. We should of course combine this with the real estate policy updates because they overlap considerably. As a general point, we haven't raised all the tiny details that are being changed, lots of language-based or word form-based changes. The presentation will mainly highlight on the large changes. On housing or tenant democracy, well, lots of changes.
Demokratiatoimielimien olemassaolo myös ARA-kohteesta vapautuneessa kohteessa. Eli meillä on nykylainsäädännöllä
we'll have the regulation is in enforce with targets that have been released from ARA.
40 vuotta ne rajoitukset. Vanhemmissa kohteissa
they have the 40 years are the extent of the regulations.
Mutta tosiaan jatkossa
but in the future
asukasdemokratian osalta myös nämä
on housing democracy will be in effect in all tenements. The legislation also will go under changes so that will move power from housing tenements to community organs of trust, so cooperating organs of trust, ASI, that is ASY in this case, and ASY will have the right to appoint a member to the AYYE financial board. Another central change is in these namings and actually the titles. We're talking about that word forms will be actually changing. These directly come from ARA. Kind of a strong suggestion from their part. And we will keep the term castle steward because it's a traditional and well-liked title. Especially in castle stewards. They have some tasks pertained by or directed by legislation, and they have specific tasks. And in the future, they will be receiving a small reward or monetary compensation for their services. Then the term asukaskokous in Finnish, tenant meetings will be changing. The reason for this change that we can have it before the vacations. The surplus meeting or the extra meeting must be held within 1 month because the new legislation will actually change it from 1 month to 2 weeks, so on a shorter notice. So well. Reaction time, then we have also legislative changes. Previous 10 tenants will remain changed to 10% of the tenants. And one big change is of course that affects our central office is this the party that sends the meeting invitations. It will be a member of staff.
No, se on ollut nykyinenkin käytäntö.
No other
Mutta tästä on aina nuijittu
others
hallituksessa.
are present, so this is something that has been discussed on the India board as of now as well.
Sitten asukastoimikunnassa täällä on sama juttu, nimi
The
muuttuu ja
committee will be changing its name, previously known as council, the committee and the castle stewards. And the regulation will no longer define how long the tenure will be. It will be decided by legislation. So, if the chairperson stops that tenure before the 2 years are up, the castle steward will actually act as chairperson, and if the castle steward will move, need to have a kind of a meeting. So there's needless bureaucracy in dismantling that. So the tasks of castle steward, if you are the chairperson, then you of course have tasks set by the legislation, of course more traditional AYYE mandated tasks. Like I said, they will be compensated in the future. Then ASY, the living cooperation organ of trust, or in the future only representatives of the tenants are members. Tasks will not be defined in the regulations because they will come from the legislation. And yes, so they were not in the legislation before, so we had to have them in the regulation. Now we do not need to have them. And in the future, our staff members, board, the financial committee, real estate committee, and other staff members have the right of residence in these meetings and right of speech, but they don't have any right of vote in the future. Also has the right to appoint a member to the financial real estate committee in the future. About decision making, is it an acute question? We'll take the questions at the end. Urgent. Let's finish this. We only have a few slides left. But we have lots of slides all in all, so we want to get home at some point. So these organs of trust don't really have a lot of decision-making power, mainly naming the member for the board, real estate board, and the student union can't really say anything about it. We may start punitive action via legislation, like sue them, but no problems probably in sight for this item. And we will not quote legislation, but rather refer to it.
About the committee, the housing committee, which is not a body within the community legislation. It has some responsibilities that is legally belongs to the landlord. So the community cannot represent the landlord, the lessor. So for example, postponing moving dates, people usually apply for them kind of in the nick of time. So the committee doesn't have time to convene early enough to handle these matters. So in these cases, the landlord's responsibility is kind of transferred over to our employees. Then about right to tenancy and the time, how long you can stay in our apartments. Now it's 5 + 2 years. And then we will prepare that if there are degrees of different lengths, then we will change it accordingly if we will have different length degrees in the future. We are not automatically granted a right of tenancy for doctoral students, but they may get it if they apply for it. Also changes related to those who start in a certain new degree. And there you can see all the sections that this refers to.
Ja tosiaan sitten, nykyinenkin käytäntö on se, että meidän asumisoikeusajassa ei oteta huomioon
currently, we don't take into account the Aalto's predecessors there if a person has studied there, because we don't have any kind of registers for that. It's not purposeful to monitor whether a person has studied at one of our predecessors. Now around down the tenancy time to the nearest month.
Aikaisempi muuttopäivä opintoja aloittaville. Eli tosiaan kesällä ennen opintojen aloitusta pystyy jatkossa sitten muuttamaan. Tällä vähennetään
So a person can, we can reduce the amount of apartments that are empty by making it possible for new students to move in already during the summer. And also to ease the congestion for the move-ins. And also in the future, if a person has a child is born into the family, the automatic extension granted by that is reduced to 1 year. It was previously 2 years. Because it wasn't in line with other reasons for this automatic extension. So we harmonize it with the other reasons. So now we do not propose any changes to the length of the time of tenancy. A lot of changes in our housing stock related to our sale of our properties, among others, the projects that Miesten and Otakaari, which also affect this. So it's hard to predict the trend for our housing quos. Also, like if you want to extend this tenancy time, well, you can check the statistics here, the numbers, that how many people have their period of tenancy ending. So you can see there that we have a lot of older students in our apartments currently, including me. So a lot of people whose tenancy period is coming to an end. Of course, we want to give more support to first-year students in their housing. As the current updates to the regulation will cause some uncertainties as well when it comes to the housing quos. So a lot of changes. So let's not make this change in addition to the others, unless you, of course, want to make it. And also in the future, if you have a military service, people can live with us without it reducing the amount of the tenancy period. Previously, a person had to move out so that it wouldn't affect it. And also non-military service and voluntary military service is also included here. Because of the Finnish Equality Ombudsman has decided thus. So this also change in the future. A person cannot move into an apartment if they are absent from the university. So this is to prevent from first-year students to move in to our apartments just when they are about to start their military service. I think we think it is better to reserve our apartments for those who are actually here. Just a moment. In the future, you can also apply to our apartments if the tenancy period has ended. What else? Doctoral students can also apply, but we use the scoring and give preferential treatment to our degree students. These are mostly issues that affect our information systems. Our housing sector, our service team can define certain apartments that are restricted only for members with valid right of residence. So if they are in high demand, for example, in the Tekkari village. Also in the future, our office would have the right to decide within the service team that if we move some apartments into also for external applicants, external tenants. And about subletting and temporary transfer of an apartment. And apologies for the material that you were given. There is an erroneous comparison made between this temporary transfer and subletting. So if someone moves outside of the capital region, they have the legal right to sublet the apartment for a maximum of 2 years. We cannot limit this because it's stated in the Finnish law, but we can limit the group of people that the person can sublet the apartment to. So we can make use of our selection criteria here as well. So in effect, that it can only be sublet to other students. Then the scoring. The old scoring model is pretty much defined by the representing council, but it complies with the legislation and ARA's guidelines quite poorly, to be frank. So ARA's guidelines, in a nutshell, are that the biggest emphasis should be the need for apartment, and we should prefer people who move in outside the capital region. And if there are several applicants who have as urgent need with each other, then we compare their income and assets. And also, yes, we should also use discretion and special conditions, take them into account. Then after these, we can define our own terms, for example, membership and student status, certain degree level, for example. And also cities may have their own conditions for rental operations. We also proposed that the board can update the scoring in the future if it's needed. So if there are demands made by Finnish authorities, then it's not very agile if we always have to go through with the representing council with that. Of course, we don't want to make these changes in secret, but rather, of course, always inform you of any potential changes. And then the final scoring will be brought to you will be brought to the decision making next year.
tosiaan asukasvalintaa tekevillä, eli käytännössä meidän työntekijöillä on
So the people who make the tenant selections,
harkintavaltaa ja erityisesti tämmöistä tarveharkintaa.
there's discretion.
Niitä kirjataan myös ohjesääntöön.
Those are written down in our guidelines.
Hieman luonnosteltu tätä uuden pisteytysmallin runkoa. Ollaan siis siirtymässä tämmöiseen tasoittaiseen järjestelmään.
Here a new model for the scoring. So we have these different levels.
Isoimmat pisteet.
At level 0 you get the biggest scores, biggest benefits.
Josta saa sitten vähemmän pisteitä. Tästä ehkä mainitsemisen arvosta, että se on tasosysteemi ja pisteytykseen mennään sitten ensi keväänä syvällisemmin. Mutta täällä on tosiaan tullut tämmöisiä uusia kohtia, kuten erittäin kiireellinen, tulot.
We also knew this very urgent.
Painavasta syystä.
Other reasons, a person's wealth. Let's go through them using examples.
Esimerkki henkilöä. Tässä on arvioida heidän kiireellisyyttä ja erityistarpeita. Niin täällä on muutama esimerkki tämmöistä erittäin kiireellisyyttä.
Some examples of very urgent applicants.
Niin hän nousee sitten sijoituksessa ykköseksi. Sitten,
so they will be placed in the spot number 1. Sitten person number 2. They're from Kouvola. An urgent need for apartment, living more than 80 kilometers away from Otaniemi, but no other special needs, so they're placed second here. And also persons 3 and 4, they live with their parents. Others have their queuing time about to end, but no other special needs. So we will go according to the queuing time, how long they've been in the line.
No, siis käytännön vaikutuksia tässä pisteytysmallissa tällä hetkellä arvioitu olevan ylipäätään se, että meidän asunnot kohdistuu paremmin niitä tarvitseville. Tällä hetkellä niin kuin
it's better to allocate our offers for apartments better to those who actually need it. Of course, this means that the queuing time will increase for those who don't have as an urgent need for apartment. So people moving in from elsewhere and new students get priority.
Ja no, tässä kääntöpuolena on sitten se, että pääkaupunkiseudulla jo asuvien on vaikeampi saada yksiöitä.
So this means that people who live in the capital region already, it's more difficult for them to get studio apartments because people moving in from elsewhere are prioritized over them.
Joo, no, muutenkin kiireellisellä asunnon tarpeella pärjää paremmin jatkossa. Lisähuomioita pisteytyksestä. No, kiireellisyyspisteitä, kun niitä haetaan, niin me oletetaan myös, että
about the urgency points
on oikeasti
when applying for them.
Asunnon tarpeeseen, ja jos rupeaa hirveästi kranttuilemaan, jättämään asuntoja pois.
If a person is very selective on the location or something else of the apartment, then we are kind of force them to take the apartment. So if they have a very urgent need, then they should also accept the apartment they are offered, because otherwise it seems that it's not that urgent. And in the future we cannot do it only for shared flats, but we have to take all apartments into account. We cannot do this urgency only for shared flats. This has been decreed by ARA and the legislation. So those who are living alone, we are primarily offering shared flats for them, but that's not the only kind of apartment we're offering them.
Yes. Sitten on tässä perhe- ja kaveriasunnon irtisanomista.
Tämä terminating the contract for a friend or family apartment.
Jatkossa meillä on yhteisvastuullisia vuokrasopimuksia edelleen.
Future we will also have these joint lease agreements where one person has the right of tenancy, and then if the other person moves out,
ei ole asumisoikeusaikaa jäljellä, niin sovelletaan AHVL:n mukaisia irtisanomisaikoja, eli lainmukaisia irtisanomisaikoja.
And we also adhere to these termination times stated in the legislation, but try to also give another apartment to replace the one they're moving out from. And of course, they cannot refuse this new. Yes, they cannot refuse the new apartment, continue living in the old one. And then a person maybe live there for a reasonable time if someone moves out, if the other person moves out. If there is not a huge demand, then this reasonable time is longer. And also may get a new friend, another friend to replace the one who is moving out. And applying for family and friend apartments.
Käytännössä noi vanhalta puolelta niin 2 ylintä palluraa on käytännössä.
From the old, these 2 topmost bullet points will be in effect also in the future. So at least one person needs to be a member of AYYE in the family apartments.
Perheasunnossa asuminen niin kuin lain näkökulmasta tarkoittaa. Laki on vuodelta 1995, eli
and this legislation related to this is from 1995. Grampi Aalto has an opinion about using, whether to talk about partners or spouses, or what kind of terminology to use, but it's directly from the Finnish legislation. That's why it's a bit outdated, the terminology. And students with families, these family apartments, they have a higher degree of protection than those living in friend apartments. And these joint responsibility contracts, lease contracts, are mainly defined by Kela. And we could change these, for example, friend apartments to 2-person shared flats, to solus. It's really not a matter of these housing regulations. Also in the future, an individual, one person may also apply for a 2-room apartment.
Ulkopuolisille hakijoille, ei-jäsenille ja ei-opiskelijoille, niin tällä pyritään välttämään myös.
And we also tried to avoid having empty apartments in these outskirts, the apartments that are not that much in demand. But also in the future, we'll try to favor applications with several people.
So about the timetable and why this has been so hurried, we should implement this into use immediately. Moving the staff apartments to HR. Also an administrative issue. And on these rental agreements and their stipulations. These changes of the system. We have a year, but it has been removed. Then depending on the process that we end up in during next year, we'll make these updates to the system. A reminder, we do not have to change the things, what we have to change, which are legislation based. That's the dissolution of ATMK, ATMK in its current system because it's no longer a part of student democracy or tenant democracy in this case. We'd have to kind of reinvent it. Yes. So enough about that. Then we may move to the questions. At this stage I would ask Minna and Touko to join me with these.
Kyllä. Saadaanko me räpiä?
Joo, saatte.
Yes, you may.
Joo, kiitos Sampo.
Thank you, Sampo, opening the discussions of the subject. And as stated earlier, my proposal is having questions that have arisen first, then go through the group speeches, and then the free conversation, so we have kind of cohesion here. So, do you have any questions? Regeli followed by Poutanen, then Piilman. Thinking about, does ASU currently have the opportunity to name a member to the Financial Real Estate Committee? I think there was some sort of connection here, or should have, right? Yes, currently there is. It's not a change. We are talking about the Financial Committee. Yes, then Poutanen. About this timetable, I'm interested in that. So that there are changes upcoming with the legislation. Is it smart for us to make these changes before the Parliament has decided on these? Can the legislation change before it's being finalized? Are we rushing things? So the idea is that when we will be deciding, the legislation will be confirmed by then. It will be up for Parliament in week 38. Because we want to discuss this, it has been brought to your table before that. Of course, there are opportunities for changes in the Parliament that won't be finalized, and it's of course possible, but it looks like the broad strokes will be clear enough already now that it will not affect us. But actually fulfill the answer. So here that the idea here is that we will always change the regulation to reflect the legislation, that it's always in accordance. So that the idea that we will keep within the framework of legislation. Then Fiilman, then Kainulainen. We have had different kinds of timetables here. The new students might actually move in 2 months before their studies start. With the current system, they kind of find out about it approximately 2 months before. Was two months just something that felt good, or was there a point to that the time frame? We looked what other communities are doing. Other communities are using 2 months as well. Mostly our apartments are being divided during July or June, actually. So we can move it to 3 months as well. It has been proposed as 2 months because June and July are the critical months. Of course, there are master's degree students that find out about this earlier, but just mentioned this example where we had these different kinds of individuals to whom the last one was 6 months. With this 6 months time, will their place in the queue like increase with the changes? We also had the tenant meetings with Haasteja usually are in January. Is there a reason that we want to keep these tenant meetings right now within this year? Or just something that was just decided once again? So it has been this old timetable that we haven't changed.
ulkoistoimikunnat siis niin kuin kuitenkin valittavissa.
So these committees will start next year, or will their tenure start immediately next year?
Ja sitten taisi olla siinä kysymys.
And then that was my questions. Yes, all of them. Followed by Kitty.
Kainulainen Kylterirengas. Mulla olisi vähän niin kuin 2 kyssäriä.
I have 2 questions here. First of which we went through that what we cannot affect, but what are the things where we can affect? What can we comment? What can we actually show our intentions on?
Mietin, että miten tässä nyt tämän simppelisti niin kuin
how to kind of put this simply.
Varsinkin tuolla niin kuin asumisoikeusaika-asiat on sellaisia,
Usually these living right of residence times is something that we can't really change. If something like this would be something that we want to do, we'll do this next year. But if we want to make these changes, please bring forth your intention to do so. We can start the preparations. But that, for example, to whom our apartments are for, mainly degree students that are our members. Then we also have all kinds of little things about looking at the documents when we look at the grounds. We have discussed on, for example, what are the grounds based on the legislation, what are not. So you can think of like, if they weren't included in that slide, then please bring them forth. And if we can't do it, if it turns out we can't do it, we'll say that, whoops, we have missed a part on the slide. Thank you. And another question that was the idea, or did I understand correctly, that the queue scoring might actually change during the queuing process, so that
no tavallaan se muuttuu niin, että sä et pysty tavallaan enää samalla tavalla
you can't like
ennustamaan, että milloin sä voisit ehkä saada
forecast when you might be getting an apartment.
Eli niin kuin henkilön sijoitus voi huonontua.
So your scoring might turn when we have new students coming in, etc. So currently your scoring may change, or your queue situation may change, but almost definitely this will change, this for the adverse, so it will change people's positions in the queue. So we're looking into how we will be depicting it, discussing it. Especially in the start, the predictability might be a lot harder because there's a large change to the proceedings. It will get better over time, of course. Currently, when we are creating the demo system for the tenant process, now that we have done that, we may probably have more accurate data on what kind of changes are predictable and what kind of times we'll be expecting. Currently, we can't even say what is the current waiting period. So these are quite broad analysis and broad evaluations and assessments. I have a question. Third question: what kind of repercussions can AYYE suffer if we would not comply by this? That Ara has said. For example, the nuorisosäätiö is a good part of this foundation that was in the court just now and in the tabloids about illegal things. Hello, Mikael Blinnikka, Kylterirengas.
I wanted to ask actually that.
Any question in English? I wanted to ask that.
I have to take this off because I can hear myself being translated. Why is it that students get a extension to their housing right if they move to a different university or start working, but students who are already in AYYE in Mikkeli do not get the same opportunity?
So,
yes, I was thinking of which language to use to answer. Mainly, the reason is that Mikkeli has we don't have student housing there. So it's part of this current study program track. Can you hear me? Yes, I could answer that the people who live in Mikkeli, they can utilize the Mikkeli rental level, which is lower than in the metropolitan area. We have the services here. We unfortunately do not have the resources to offer the identical services to that of Mikkeli. Students know that when they are applying for a study spot in a different municipality or a given municipality. Also need to take into note that they are coming to master's degree student studies. They have 2 years, which is mainly what Mikkeli incumbents will be receiving when they come here to Otaniemi.
All right, well, I would like to add that if somebody is studying in a different university, which may not be in Mikkeli, they will still get their study right extended and still benefit from living in cheaper housing in that other smaller city, wherever it is, maybe Kouvola, for example. So I don't think that's really a fair argument to make that, well, it's cheaper there, so they don't get the extension, but it's also cheaper if they go to another university in another small place that's not part of like Aalto already.
You should take into account there the fact that if you are studying somewhere else, in addition to your Aalto studies, they're usually less than a year, not 3 years. So in that case, Mikkeli is as kind of a special case. But I won't go into it in more detail. This is an issue where the representative council can decide to change things if it so wishes. But there are reasons inbuilt to this whole thing. But mainly it would mean that people who come from Mikkeli would have 5 years. Is this something that we actually want to do? We can decide on that here. I'll also interject enough that it's an interesting discussion, but we'll take the questions first and then return to this. Emil had a question. Thank you, Chairperson. You mentioned that the chairperson of a housing committee has legislative requirements, or they have kind of decision-making power, or can they decide things with their opinion, of course, but what are these stipulations set by the legislation? When you're talking about the decision-making power, I have to open this up in a sense that I think that the chairperson does not have any legal requirements to do these, but they have to kind of host the meetings, etc., but no other specific powers or things. When I looking with Control F, shows that the new proposal that has been at the turn of the year, the chairperson or persons of trust will commit the organ of trust for living. So that kind of decision-making power they do have. So and there are other association, regulation, or legislation-based requirements that a chairperson has. It's not; these are not associations. Here, the new legislation will actually be comparative to associations, and they will be under that legislation in a larger capacity. Thank
Matiaksella
you.
vielä kysymys.
Matthias have any other questions?
Ole hyvä.
Please.
Kiitos Saikku Luova.
Thank you.
Onko teillä jonkinlaista analyysiä tai arviota siitä,
Do you have any analysis or estimate on how large a portion of AYY's current applications would be considered urgent or very urgent? Is it possible that we have a situation where unless you're very urgent, you theoretically can't get an apartment because the queues are so long? So directly we don't have a number like this. Why we are bringing this, we're making the demo. Practically most of the current urgent applicants would be very urgent in the future. So a small portion of them would be urgent. So I don't have a system open here, so I can't really get you a quote, but that is something that is affected by time. We have the slider. As the academic year changes, we'll have new students. Of course, we'll have the very urgent scores will surpass the fact that we'll not have flats for almost anybody else than the very urgent ones.
Sitten yläpoikelus.
Yläpoikelus.
Kiitos puheenjohtaja yläpoikelus.
Thank you, Chairperson.
Ehkä tuohon äskeiseen kysymykseen.
To continue kind of extrapolate that.
Eli se, että käytännössä kaikki
So practically, people who live on the campus, they will have to live with their parents or on a private housing. So I don't know if that's the will of the legislator. Have you kind of seen things that are not good to the students in this new things that we should advocate on changing? Has something like this already been made? I have a guess on what you're going to answer, but we'll see. My personal opinion is that AYYE could do a lot more. We could resource it. Remember this when discussing budget. One thing that has been coming is that it's not a legislation, but Kela housing support. How does it pertain to joint contracts and applications? Can't think of any others currently that would be kind of detrimental to students. So let's see that the largest problem would be that the metropolitan area has less student housing than we have students. That is kind of the big problem, that we can have more funding to build more student housing. That would be kind of a critical thing. So something to take to Syl maybe. We had a request for the floor from Blinikka.
Blinikka, Kyltärirengas. Kysy vaan, mä tiedän, että nämä pisteet, pisteen muutokset menee hallitukseen. Meneekö myös asumisoikeusmuutokset hallituksen puolella vai onko se vielä like in the Kyltärirengas? I mean in the representative council. Anteeksi.
No, the time will be looked at in the representative council.
Hienoa. Kysymykset taitaa aika hyvin olla.
So that probably wraps up most of the questions. Of course, we may have them. So I think there are
Ja samalla muistan tässä
group
kohtaa, että jos ryhmäpuheenvuoronne ei ole vielä
requests. If your group's request is not
löytänyt, niin
at the
sinne myös lähettämään.
student union's emailing list yet, so vihreämpi Aalto, greener Aalto will start.
Anteeksi jo, vaihdoin lennosta.
Kuuluuko?
Can you hear me? Thank you for the floor. We are happy that the discussion has been opened in well ahead of the time, sparked a lot of discussion. We have a few points that we want to make. The postgrad students. When you're a postgrad student, your income is based on applications. We feel that we should actually look at postgrad students with the same eye that we look at degree students. Secondly, joint custodial agreements, who are seen as more important. There's reading from the paper, so very hard to interpret for the interpreter. So this raises a question on who is considered a spouse and who has the decision-making power of deciding who is a spouse. And we also need to ask on why living with a partner is seen as more valuable as seen as living with a friend. Vihreämpi Aalto thinks that this kind of classification is outdated and mentions of this should be stricken from the regulation. We hear at the group chairs meeting that some mentions for partners and spouses come from the legislation. Give the unneeded ones up. Also in living, we should actually favor separate rental agreements, so we could change friend apartments into 2 people studio or solo apartments. Thirdly, the right of residence and start time. AYYE graduate students, and it starts from the start of your studies. Many students will be queuing for months or even years to get an AYYE apartment. The regulation update, we have the opportunity to discuss also, is this a practical way of handling matters? For us, first, that a student may actually live in a student housing as long as they are a degree student and will do 20 credits a year or 40 credits in the next previous 2. AYY's current system increases changes in tenants and favors new students, but it feels unfair to some. Vihreämpi Aalto would like to spark a discussion on whether or not should the dates be actually based on start of studies, and is the time allocated for right of residence enough? Next up, Voltti.
Kiitos puheenjohtaja. Voltti, nopea korjaus tuohon aikaisempaan.
A quick correction that Hoas actually writes the shared apartments. If you have a studio or a single room apartment, it's a different story altogether. Our group chair is, in short, there are several challenges in this proposal, technically and probably ideologically. But these 2 are the most essential. You should not make regulations that will end up in a situation where shared apartment people who want a studio may not gain one due to their studies. So getting stuck in shared apartments is not a thought-after situation. We would hopefully have only a 1 committee. It would allow for quicker discussions between the owner and the tenants and enable good development in the future. only housing-based committees are very small and can't really affect changes. And it also depends on the house whether or not you have actually good, enthusiastic individuals. I would say that we could develop things for the better in Otaniemi. This would also enable larger projects easier. So a larger committee would have a larger budget. But hopefully we can get a good change in effect.
Yes, thank you. Can I comment? Yes. Our house meetings are currently divided according to the rental allocation unit. And we are about to make them bigger, so we are of the same mind here, actually. Excellent. Any other group speeches? Kainulainen from Kylterirengas.
Kainulainen Kylterirengas. Mä lähetän tämän meidän ryhmäpuheenvuoron vielä sitten.
I'll send you this, also the English translation onto the mailing list. But yes, it would seem that this has been done, this preparation with the regulation first. And there are taken into account some special needs for apartments, kind of a student-specific housing needs, such as that new students would be prioritized and that they would be able to move in before the official start of their studies, because now many people moved in during the orientation week. And it's also nice that if people, also non-students could apply for the apartments. And also, if we move on to a need-based scoring, we also have to make sure that the scoring remains transparent, because many people have now accustomed to monitoring their line, their position in the line. So even though we are now yet going through the scoring in more detail, but still I would hope that people in the Mikkeli campus would also be better taken into account. And of course, other student groups at Aalto as well. Thank you. Any other group speeches?
Ei vaikuta olevan, joten
apparently no.
Siirrytään sitten ihan vapaisiin puheenvuoroihin.
So then we can have these free individual speeches. So you may request the floor. Poutanen.
Poutanen, Vihreämpi Aalto.
Poutanen from Vihreämpi Aalto.
4 pointtia.
I have 4 points to make.
Ensin, voidaanko saada tästä
First,
dokumentista rivinumeroitua
can we get the document with line numbers? It would be much easier to comment on if there were the line numbers. And hopefully we'll get it by the next meeting.
Tässä ei nyt tällä hetkellä ollut mitään pistäytystä esillä.
And currently there were no kind of a mention of the scoring, but in the material that was sent to the groups before, it talked explicitly about points, about scores. So will there be those anymore?
Ne on tulossa nyt sitten siellä niinku helmikuun puolella tai niinku siellä ensi vuoden puolella, että tehdään siihen
They'll be added next year when we have done more testing. Okay.
Sitten tässä oli tämä lisäys siitä, että
also there was an addition that a new student may move into months before their studies start, but then there's also an addition that it would mean that they would have to move out earlier according to the time they have moved in. I think this is very peculiar addition, because if we try to stick with these expected graduation times instead of just looking at when the people have moved in with AYYE. So it would be kind of peculiar if a person had to move out before this expected graduation time has elapsed. And lastly, if a person is unable to live with others, then they may be granted an extension to the right of residence. And in this case, they need to submit a medical certificate that also states the reason for if a person cannot live alone, that is, independently. I'd like to ask if it's actually reasonable or needed to know these kind of medical conditions or these medical details. Wouldn't it be just enough if the doctor would just say in their statements everything that is needed, and the doctor would make the decision if the reason is reason enough, instead of the housing people actually making the decision based on these details? Currently, it's the housing committee that is aware of the health-related reasons of tenants. And all the parties who select tenants, they have to go through this, and of course this information is confidential. Everyone must be aware that this is confidential information. And this is purely related to the tenant selection, also in many other cases than in this one. It's a very important element. The point is not that we get to know this kind of personal matters of someone. For example, this example, if there's a person who cannot live alone, if they, for example, have to be in some kind of institute for a time, then we will get this kind of a certificate from the institution, and they will give us a certificate, and then we will act accordingly. Now the housing committee handles these extensions to the right of residence in a way that the medical certificates are anonymous. So actually they're not will not learn any individuals' medical details. But yes, my suggestion was that the committee doesn't have to know the reason behind it if the doctor says that this is reason enough, that this is a sufficient reason, that the doctor makes the decision if the reason is sufficient. That was my suggestion.
Yes.
Siren from Aallon kokoomus. Very good points have been made, especially for the potential changes made in February, where we will change these urgency points. What's interesting is taking these studios there, because it may give room to a loophole that if you, for example, for a landlord, you make 2-month tenancy contracts until you get a studio from AYYE. This is not possible now, because the people can only apply for shared flats. And we can also intervene if something like this happens. Yes, this has already been taken into account, so that for urgency points is affected by what kind of apartments they apply for. So if they don't apply for example, for shared flats, they will not get full points. Unless there's a very good reason for this. And the urgency points are in effect only after the first apartment offer. If the person rejects it, they will not get the urgency points for the next application. Yes, great. And my second point was about this military service, because now the system favors this kind of a way where you go to the military service before starting your studies, because it grants you 1 extra year, and I don't think this is equal or fair, especially because of the gender-based military service in Finland. So has this been discussed? Is there some kind of a change coming up? What kind of ideas the board has about this?
Yes, siinä on mun puheenvuoro. Kiitos.
Thank you.
Sen jälkeen Filmanin puheenvuoro, ja tosiaan muita puheenvuoroja voi pyytää.
Thank you, Filman, after this, and you may still request the floor. Saikku is next in line.
Kiitos puheenjohtaja Filma Votti.
Thank you. First, a quick comment to Vihreämpi Aalto. In the Financial Real Estate Committee, we went through the presentation, even though the scores were mentioned, but we were actually told that it's this chart that we use. We don't really use or this flow chart, we don't really use the scores. So even if you have points, that doesn't really tell anything about the order of priority. It shows what kind of level you are in the flow chart, but it doesn't put you above others at that level. It just says that castle wardens should be removed from the regulations, but castle wardens are still mentioned in the document. So will this change be adopted or not?
Joo, eli tällä hetkellä se on siellä niinku lyhennetyssä
Yes, now it's in a kind of shortened form that the castle wardens
voidaan maksaa palkkio ja niinku noita tehtäviä ei enää niinku
the reason specified by or that their tasks are no longer detailed, described in detail, but all mentions of castle wardens are still included in the document. Yes, they are not removed. Once I have a group of different points, different observations I have made, I will try to send them via email as well. So I think that we should really remove all mentions of castle wardens, because I don't think it really serves any purpose. If the document, if we want to define, for example, the tasks of castle wardens, it should be done somewhere else, because it cannot be assumed that the chair of the housing committee is also a castle warden. And the committee will have a relevant decision-making powers also in the future, which should be taken into account in the changes that we are about to make. And I believe the HOAS model for the scoring is nice. And also a suggestion, the budgeting and housing committee should be tied to the number of tenants. So for example, at HOAS, the budget increases every year for the housing committee. I think AYYE should do this as well. And also, the comment states that only 2-year extension if your right of residency has concluded. So is it purposeful that it's only 2 years, or should it be 3 years, or did I understand something incorrectly? And then about employment, contractor relationships, and about whether they cause the right of residency to elapse. So I think it's fair that if you have a working contract with 0 hours, it would not cause your right of residence to elapse. Because it would be nice to have workers, employees also within our community.
vaan jos näitä tarjotaan, niin silloin pitää olla tosiaan kokoaikainen työsuhde, jolla tätä etua saa.
And in order to get this benefit, the person would need to be a full-time employee.
Tässä on asetettu näitä lääkäritodistuksen aikarajoja. Niin mielestäni on epäoikeudenmukaista, että jos sanotaan,
and I think it's unfair
kuntoutus on pitkäaikainen,
that if you have a long-time rehabilitation, then you cannot study. But then I think it's not fair that you will be reimbursed only for 1 year of right of residence. So we should look at the time that a person can study full-time. And if you haven't been able to study full-time, then we should compensate them for this time that they have not been able to study, that they can also live with us also in the future. I also agree with what I mentioned with faulty, that if studios are empty and we have people applying for them,
jotka haluaa meille niin kuin lisäpisteellä sisään mahdollisesti, totta kai siis oikeutetulla lisäpisteellä sisään, niin pääsevät niin tarvitaan näitä soluja sitten.
That then the new people applying for apartments would be primarily offered shared apartments.
Vain yksi asukastoimikunta on erittäin järkevä asia.
And only one housing committee. I think this is very reasonable change.
Tuotiin esille, niin jos se on vähentää meidän taakkaa, työntekijöiden taakkaa, niin se on hyvä asia.
And removing this section about that would ease the workload of our employees if we remove this section about the deposit. I think also in other student unions apartments, they have removed this kind of a clause. It would be nice for our students. And for a joint contract, it requires the approval of all parties, but I don't think we can actually demand this. If we want to terminate your contract, I don't think it's reasonable to require that all parties need to agree if a person wants to terminate their own contract, even if it's a joint contract. Then about an additional housing meeting convening that, I don't know if it's a change in legislation, but I think currently the law can only hold an additional meeting if the housing committee so decides. And that there's a 1/10 issue here as well. But then castle wardens have been given the right to convene an additional house meeting, which I don't think is possible within the legislation.
Joo, tuolta tulee vielä. Joo, no ehkä tämä riittää tältä erää ja laitan muut kommentit sitten tulemaan sähköpostilla tai muuta vastaavaa. Kiitos hyvästä valmistelusta ja presissa oli ihan loistava. Toivottavasti saadaan meille tehokas ja hyvä asukasdemokratia myös tulevaisuudessa. Kiitos.
Thank you. Apologies, double mute for the interpreter there. Do you want to interject or answer for Emil? You may continue with this later, maybe via email, like Emil said. They will send the rest via email. Saikku will be next, and Perttula in the queue. I would also like to remind this tool that you should have, that when we are going through a broad preliminary debate and we'll be discussing, that you may wave these blue placards if you agree, instead of asking for a whole. If everybody actually has strong opinion from all of you, we'll be taking it into account in the preparation work. Saikku Luova, how did this work when we have this internal move? What kind of change will it be undergoing in the future if we have urgency as a larger factor?
haun aikana.
Which will of course apply only during the first application.
Joo, eli tällä hetkellä se käytännössä
So yes,
toimii, että
currently it's so that
ryhmään, eli
in the same housing group, mainly with Teekkarikylä studios or Teekkarikylä shared apartments, you may get these extra scores without any other requirements so that you may actually get to the top of the queue. In the future, the scoring that you will receive will actually go down unless you have an urgent reason, if you have a kind of background, for example, a breakup or kind of a family-related issues or other situations, then it's possible to apply for these without good reason. So if you need kind of an accessible apartment, for example, so for good grounds, you may apply for changing into other groups of tenements than one you are living in currently. Do you want any other clarifications? That should do it. Thank you. Thank you, followed by Perttula.
Yes, Perttula Kylteri-Rengas.
Perttula Kylteri-Rengas. This might be more to the February discussion, but I would like to say a comment about that. The general right of residency should not be extended or transferred from its first date. It clearly is actually beneficial for older students. We mentioned first years, this is beneficial against the first years. Older students usually have better income, they have jobs in compared to first years, but they could actually utilize these apartments for a longer period of time and maybe make kind of these tasks that they might live with HOAS change to AYYE later, and then this Arkadian Katu studio, you can actually get a place even later. But this might be a February issue. Thank you. A comment that maybe I'll give a kind of a direction giving or instruction giving both if you want to change this in the future.
Onko tämä just tähän asiaan
liittyen? Is this pertaining to this?
Mietittiin sitä, että tästä voisi jopa niin kuin käydä
we could maybe think that we could have a preliminary vote that will we change helmikuuta tai no thinking of next winter, so that do we want to change this closer to what HOAS has or look at the changes, and or is the will so that we will keep the current system so that it will start from the start of your studies? I was thinking like could we maybe have this discussion that maybe could have to vote on that right now. Yes, practically I would say that the template, keep it as it is, or broaden it in the future, bring it in options during the winter, so to what direction, etc. So bringing these options, would it be HOAS's way or extend it by a few years, or what will it be? Let's do that. We're actually having this discussion, which is very, very nice. So let's continue with the group statements and take the vote at the end. Next up, we'll have Poutanen and Poikelus. Poutanen followed by Poikelus. Thank you, Poutanen, Vihreämpi Aalto. I would like to oppose Perttula a bit that even with the student, like in the middle of the mental health crisis and the older student categorizing as well-doing rich people is a bit kind of cutting the queue in a sense that kind of making things. It would be a bit lazy to say that, well, the older students have good income. There are several living situations and some ways of living your life.
Veeralla tähän nopea kommentti väliin vai?
Quick comments on this one, or
Onko sulla Niko tähän vai?
have comment on this, or Mäntylä interject and then yläpoikkeus.
Hyvä mylly tästä käyntiin.
Get the rumble going.
Yes,
Mäntylä from Schisma. Mainly I'd like to notify that is it not so that the housing time you can ask for an extension with a good cause. I'd say a mental health problem would qualify as a good cause here. I agree with the previous speaker, but I was thinking like, how do you want to extend it by 5 years? It'd be interesting to, based on this discussion, it would be good to hear what a good cause would be. Yläpoikkeus followed by Fielman. I'd like to say that currently these are at the committee. We have mental health related ones as well. This current discussion may be the fact that I would not want us to create frameworks which can be easily utilized to exploit the system. Example, if you're at the end of your studies, kind of fishing for good apartments is kind of exploiting. So kind of, I would like to reiterate on the ARA's kind of option to look at things differently. So maybe looking at the extensions can be sought after for. If you the optimum is never kind of to almost go with the people who want to exploit. So yes, two things. When we discussed Mikkeli, I would like to say that I feel that this kind of, when you Sampo said the comment about Mikkeli has a cheaper level of rents, it's not actually black and white because the maximum for housing allowance is lower. So you get less rent, but of course less allowance if you the levels are actually pretty close to one another, so the changes are not that big. Also a question about this discussion that we started regarding right of residence. How would you evaluate that? How much resources will this kind of survey take? And if we need more resources, would it be more sensible to look with the evaluation? Is this something that we want to focus on in terms of development next year? Are we kind of doing this as a bypass at this point? Or as an urgent need? Also to pertaining to this transferal period, it would require a lot of changes from the system. If we're talking about, if we would need to look at the current model in a critical light, for example, like change HOAS or go with their style. We also did some options on this, like was said in the appendix. This is why we wanted to be, well, at the start of the winter when we have to discuss with the discussions, if we want to do it, if you have to do it in the system several times, it will be quite expensive if we want to look at this. So we'll best do it when we are doing it or incur extra costs. I'd like to actually defend my Mikkeli comment. It's based on mainly that the housing allowance does not actually cover in Helsinki. There's the Kela maximum, which will be included. Last I checked, in July, the rental market is so that a studio is about 750 euros a month. And single person living alone can gain about 695 euros. In Mikkeli, this comparison is not as large in the sense that the student allowance will account for some of the rent as well. This is a national problem, but in the metropolitan area, we have a worse situation. The housing allowance does not actually cover the costs of living. Hopefully my answer was sufficient. I may continue this discussion with, of course, in the future, but yes.
Seuraavaksi sitten Fiilmanin puheenvuoro.
Next up, Fiilman. Saikku in the queue.
Kiitos puheenjohtaja Fiilman-Votti. Nopea niin kuin vastakommentti siihen,
A quick
tuolla mainittiin
interjection we mentioned in mental health extensions, taking into account how badly a lot of our students are doing the process in itself and gaining more time to actually initiate the processes might be quite heavy. They might not actually even go through the process even though they'd have the right to do so.
Matias, ole hyvä.
Saikku Luova. Onko arviota, että
is there an estimate or even a guesstimate that will this regulation change actually change the housing team's workload? For example, if we have a lot more evaluation or if you are urgent or very urgent, how do the employees have time?
No siis tulee asukasvalinnan suhteen, niin se tulee kasvattaa.
Well, with the choices, it will increase the workload. We can make the system so that it will, as little as possible, take more resources, but it will take more time for the staff to actually go through these things. There are changes that shorten the time, but currently for the open applications is something that causes a lot of work. We will take actually an apartment and take it to outside sourcing. Is something that currently takes a lot of resources. There are these things. I can't say a broader comparison or estimate. It will be larger, smaller, what it will be, but in itself, this consideration will increase the time for the process. But at the same time, we are aiming to simplify, take this into normal systems regarding our rentals.
Meidän järjestelmään, niin siihen järjestelmään työnnetään sisään myös sellaisia, jotka mahdollistaa sen vähemmän manuaalisen työn, mikä meillä tällä hetkellä on kaikkein eniten työllistä.
It also enables our less manual work in the sense that it will create space for.
Varmasti ei mitenkään nosta yhteensä yhtään. Päinvastoin ehkä prosessi.
It will probably not increase. It might even make processes easier.
Seuraavaksi Fiilmanin vuoro.
Next up, Fiilman. Quick question on the slide. Can you explain what does this consist of?
On saanut lisäaikaa ja sen takia on niin paljon enemmän asumisoikeuksia.
Because we have so much more residents, right?
Eikö tässä näissä luvuissa ole sisällä kaikki, joilla on
these figures contain all people who have right of residence for reason X.
Toi ei ole kuitenkaan ihan sellainen histogram, jossa on koko
It's not kind of a
siitä, että se data on siellä
historical sense that we've had the data there for a long time.
Käsiteltävissä muodossa, mutta niin kuin
kind of been in a hard to handle form, but
niin tuossa voi olla myös syitä, että tuo ei ole se alkuperäinen, milloinkaan pitänyt päättää, vaan se, että niin kuin mikä se tämänhetkinen tilanne on.
But this is the current situation.
Se näyttää hauskalta, kun olettaisiin, että se olisi aika tasainen se päättymisaika niin kuin vuosittain, että kuinka monella henkilöllä päättyy meidän asumisaika.
No tuo juuri näyttää sitä, että meillä on
it shows that Currently, we mainly have
pidemmällä opintoja olevia niin kuin
people who are longer or further off in their studies
tuo on kuitenkin niin kuin
in our housing, because it's kind of a
eli ei pystytä niin kuin
kind of
suoraan
a
sanomaan, että toi ei
aggregator score. It doesn't really tell that how many years have you studied.
nopein, jota me saadaan, eli vaikuttaisi siltä, että meillä olisi niin kuin enemmän 4. ja 5. vuoden opiskelijoita kuin
mean that we have more 4 or 5 years than first or second years in our houses.
Vielä puheenvuoropyyntöjä.
Any other request for floor?
Joo, mulla on ylhäällä Sireeni poistuu.
Yes, Siren left.
Yes, mä voisin tässä kohtaa vielä sanoa, että
Yes, I'd like to mention that I don't mean to be any kind of hostile towards the people in Mikkeli. So I'm very happy to discuss the situation, status of the Mikkeli students as well.
Ei vainaskaan. Jos ei enempää puheenvuoropyyntöjä on, niin sit voitaisiin varmaan...
Maybe if there are no other requests for floor,
äänestyttää suuntaan.
I think then we can have the preliminary vote, a guiding vote. Do you have a slide for this?
Joo, eli tosiaan nyt, jos vielä teillä ei ole näitä kolmenvärisiä paperilappuja täältä.
So yes, if you don't yet have these 3 different colors of papers in front of you, please come up here to get them. And yes, this is not binding in any way, this vote. It just kind of gives the board an idea of what you think. To help in their preparatory work.
Onko me toista slaidia tähän? On, laita vaan. Ottakas, mä luen tänne ensin itsekin.
Just a moment, I'll read this through. Yes. Number 1 is that the current residency time is good and functions well. And something. Yes, actually there will now probably be also a translation for the options soon on in the screen. The interpreter cannot see what is on the slides at the moment.
Eli meillä on nyt suuntaantavan äänestykseen 2 vaihtoehtoa ja 1 tyhjä.
So yes, we have 2 options and also the white. So the blue slip means that the current model for the right of residence is good, that we should not use resources to change it, and that we will go with the old one. And the red paper means that we should look into new models for the right of residence and the time of residence, so that the board will allocate resources into this investigation. And of course, the white slip means that you will vote for empty.
Nykyisen mallin mukaan lukien niin kuin, myös niin kuin, pidennykset, joita nykyisistä ohjesäännöistä löytyy.
The current model also
siellä ohjesäännöissä on, joka on nyt vähän muutettuna.
Includes the one in the guidelines and the regulations, including the extensions. Does anyone have anything to ask about these voting options, or is everything clear?
On ilmeisen selvää.
Seems to be clear. So I'll ask you to raise them soon. And if it looks like that it's difficult to see which vote has the majority, then we will ask the vote counters here. But if it looks very clear, the results, then we don't need to have an actual counting of the votes. Is everyone ready?
Hyvä, eli laput ylös nyt.
Good, raise your slips now, the papers.
On se aika selvä, mutta tehdään nyt kuitenkin
I think it's pretty clear, but let's have a count. Just in case and just for practice. So vote counters, if you could come up here, please.
Hienoa, ja tehdään nyt
Great.
vaikeampi harjoitus, eli pyydän väri kerrallaan.
This is a bit more difficult. Raise them one color at a time. So,
Ensin siniset laput ylös.
first, blue papers.
Muistakaa laskea omat mukaan.
Remember to count your own votes as well, the vote counters.
Eli saatteko saman tuloksen? Ja mikä tulos se on? 18.
What is the result? 18. Okay. Then we'll please lower the slips and now raise the red slips if you want to vote for the red option.
Tarkkaa puuhaa. Äänestäkää tosiaan vain yhtä vaihtoehtoa.
Please vote only for one option.
11.
11.
Valkoiset laput ylös.
And let's have the white slips, the empty votes.
Täsmääkö tää suunnilleen meidän kokonaismäärään?
Does this correspond with our total number of votes present? Yes, great. So blue, 18, red, 11, empty, 2. Thank you for the vote. Thank you for the vote counters. Excellent counting work.
Ja vielä annan yhden mahdollisuuden, jos on herännyt jotain.
And there's still one more chance to request the floor if you want to comment on something. But if there are no requests, then we will move on with the agenda. Seems awfully quiet. So closing discussion, making the decision, the motion was that the Reps and Council decided to record the preliminary debate on the housing regulations, and this has been decided. Please quiet in the room. Closing item 9. Moving to item 10, decision on cooperative associations. According to Section 8 of AYY's Association Regulation, the Student Union Board may nominate an association as a cooperative association, but the approval of the Reps and Council is required for the admission as a cooperative association. And I think the new association regulation entered into force last December, and no cooperative associations have yet been presented to the Reps and Council thus far. But now, Antti. Thank you, Chair. I'll keep this short.
Eli taustaa tässä aika hyvin jo tiivistettiinkin, mutta ehkä on syytä lukea
I think now also read this through for the interpreters, this new Section 8.
On yhteistyöyhdistyksiä, joille ylioppilaskunta on delegoinut osan ylioppilaskunnalle kuuluvista tehtävistä.
Is that we have cooperative associations and the part of the student union's tasks have been delegated to them, and we will draw up a written cooperation contract with the cooperation association where we will list the benefits and obligations concerned. The board examines and, if needed, edits these conditions every 2 years, and in connection to that, the associations need to report on the fulfillment of their obligations stated in the contract. The board may present as an association, as a cooperation association, but the representing council must approve of it. And cooperation associations have the same benefits as subject organizations, but Section 11 to transfer of funds is not applied to cooperation associations.
Ja nyt tänään tarkoitus olisi siis päättää siitä, hyväksytäänkö AYYn piiriin uusia
And today it's a supposition to decide if we or not we approve more associations to AYYE. These kind of cooperation associations have never been approved before. The board's template is that we approve the kauppatieteiden ylioppilaat, Tokio ry, Probba ry, and Teknologföreningen. With these associations, we've had preliminary discussion. These are the organizations that, or exception to Teknologföreningen, they were already in the scope of this, that have been had a special stance within AYYE previously. So here, when we discussed with the chairpersonship, we were at questions regarding what will be included in these contracts. It is the board that will decide on the contents after the negotiations have concluded, but preliminary discussions have taken place, and Ripatti, member of the board, has discussed with all of these 4 associations. With a large probability, the contracts will depict the current activities that is actually already taking place. Joint requirements for the associations, what they would do for AYYE, to have advocacy and open events, and what would they actually get in return. Where always is mentioned during the monetary support and smaller points pertaining to the specific associations. Nothing very dramatic. We've had discussions of maybe Tokyo could have a larger tasks on AYY's artistic endeavors. The night is pretty long. Artistic resources was, I think, the word used. So we could actually get better art-related stuff for AYYE. The presentation was short. I will answer questions if there are questions. I could take the first floor myself. It's kind of a last-minute thing, but I have these other association-related items. It would be most hygienic if these board members or people in the boards of these associations could actually recuse themselves for this item.
Tässä kohtaa olen kehottanut jääväämään. En ole vielä.
This is I've just urged people to recuse themselves, not ordered or as such.
Nikola Kylterirengas
kohdan
käsittelystä ja annan tästä
I'll recuse myself for this item and give
Niemi Kylterirengas jäävää itseni tästä myös pois.
Hienoa, kiitos. Yleisen käytännön mukaan niin pyydän teitä poistumaan tästä salista. Ja pahoittelen tosiaan, että tuli esille tässä kohtaa.
Are recusing yourself? Can you move away from the room? They maybe could have actually mentioned this before this item. But if you recognize yourself in this
4 tahon hallituksesta esimerkiksi, niin pyydän teitä tässä kohtaa mainitsemaan asiasta.
Ilmeisesti ei ole siis muita jahka poistuneet, niin sitten vastaan kysymyksiin.
Yes.
And people have moved out, I will answer the question. Sorry about this work. So questions. Filman.
Kiitos puheenjohtaja Filman Voltti. Muutama kysymys tästä aiheesta.
A few questions. First off, is AYY's board proposing this? B, have these associations in their boards meetings decided that they want to be combination associations?
Päätös on hallituksen pohjaesitys, että nämä
the decision is the template is the board's proposal, so we have discussed with all the parties.
100% varmuutta, että onko he itse päättänyt hakea, mutta
I don't have 100% credibility on whether or not they have decided to seek status as cooperative associations. But still, we can propose them, but we cannot approve cooperative associations that have not submitted a claim to do so.
Näiden yhdistysten tehtävä on ihan selkeästi ilmaista meille, että he haluavat yhteistyöyhdistyksiksi. Eli tulkitsen, että näin ei ole, on vain alustavia keskusteluja vielä.
Siis kaikkien, vai onko Otto sulle jotain muuta vastattavaa vielä vastaavaa?
Mä voin sen verran
I can comment that when we have the names in the contract, obviously the associations want to be cooperative associations.
Mitkä yhdistykset me lähtökohtaisesti tahdotaan tähän.
Okei, eli onko siis asia niin, että tämä päätös ei olekaan se, että
is it so that this decision is not that we will just be approving them, or do we have the inherent word form that as long as they sign the contract they will be approved?
Tämä on se oikea esitys siis.
No. Esitys on siis, että edustajista hyväksyy nämä yhdistykset AY:n yhteistyöyhdistyksiksi, yhdistykset tai muut tahot. No, se on myös yksi osakunta, joo.
Yes, so we have these organizations. Once they've been approved, of course, we will then make separate contracts. Yes, we are approving things that we don't actually know what we are approving.
Mutta me ei olla hyväksymässä sitä yhteistyöyhdistyssopimusta, joka on kyllä kaksisuuntainen sopimus, niin kuin sopimukset on.
Very technical discussion here. Interpreters fully falling off the wagon. So when we are discussing this, they all are willing, they are all understanding what is happening, all these organizations. So as is stated, that the board will approve the contracts, and we've made the interpretation that the representative council should maybe give its blessing that this is okay. And then the board will make the negotiations. As I feel it, should be the different way around. But once they've applied, then we could decide whether or not we will accept them.
Oleellista tässä kohtaa on juurikin se esimerkiksi, että
essential here is that regrettably some of these associations do kind of have this kind of segregation in the sense that they have these benefits that they enjoy within AYYE.
Tai niin kuin siis hyväksyvät jäseneksi Tokion mukaan lukion, eli Tokio on TF:n, ja mun mielestä ei Tokion TF:n pääsee kaikki Aalto-yliopiston opiskelijat, mutta näihin muihin.
So all students of Aalto can actually gain
mielestäni tämä on asia, mikä on
some of these, but not all of these organizations. I feel that this is a very essential thing in our community.
Yhteistyöyhdistyksiksi ilman, että he koskee
we cannot approve them as cooperative associations.
Eli esitän, että me ei hyväksytä näitä.
So my proposal is that we will not approve these before we have these contracts here. for our perusal.
Onko sä Emi nyt tekemässä Noniin, joo, hyvä. Saat toki aikaa valmistella muutosesityksesi, jos sellaisen kerran olet tekemässä.
Onko sillä aikaa minulle muita kysymyksiä aiheeseen liittyen?
Do you have any other questions to me regarding the subject?
Jos ei tule, sieltä. Sori, mä rupesin jakamaan puheenvuoroja tälleen niin kuin.
I already started handing out the floor. The microphone, as it were. It's like from Luova, it seems that this is very good proposals. We have known about this for a long time. I believe that the board can best look at the individual contracts. Seems very good in my opinion.
Muuta kysyttävää, kommentteja?
Any other questions or comments?
Jos ei, tuleeko Filman esitykselle kannatusta?
Not, do you have support for Filman's? Filman is preparing this proposal for change. We'll have a short technical break.
Regelin. Kannatat? Joo, kyllä. Sitten,
You second it? Yes, okay, so is your proposal for change?
pitää olla se muutosesitys, mitä me ollaan
You need to have the proposals if we want to vote for it. Is the proposal so that
vai onko teidän esitys se, että
we want to stop this, or that we do not approve? Put it through the official form so that we can actually get it here. You may Google it.
Se on äkkisin naputtelee ton. Laitetaan nyt ihan ton virallisen mankelin kautta. Niin.
Let's just send it through the official form.
Lomake.ay.fi kautta hallinto kautta muutosehdotus lomake viiva proposed viiva amendment viiva form viiva ändringsförslag kautta viiva. Kirjoita Googleen AY muutosehdotus. Se löytyy sillä.
Right on Google, AYYE proposal for change.
Voitko laittaa mulle saman tekstin vaikka TG:ssä vielä, niin päästään. No niin, kiitos.
Sillä välin muista voitte käyttää aikaa hyödyksi vaikka tulla
Because you
katsomaan
may use your time.
syötävää, jos on
And check if we have any snacks here at the up front.
Niin. Antti. Lasketko meidän?
Joo, pahoittelut sen verran tekniikkaa, että korjataan äänestäjien
Have
määrä
enough
oikeaksi.
technical things will correct the amount of number of voters to be correct.
Aivan hetki sitten. Kiitos.
Kuisma left a while ago.
Puheenjohtaja, jos yhtään pitää laskut paikkansa, niin 27 pitäisi nyt olla ääniä salissa, kun 2 on estyneen.
2 people are recused. Or have recused themselves in this case.
Joo, eli jatketaan kokousta.
So, let us continue the meeting. Sorry about the
Eli meillä on nyt hallituksen pohjaesitys.
delay. We have the template of the board. AYYE cooperative associations would be approved. Also following organizations, the Kauppatien ylioppilaat, Tokio Probba and Teknologföreningen.
Ja nyt meillä on muutosesitys, jonka on tehnyt Fielman.
A positive change made by Fielman, supported by Regelin.
Edustajisto päätti olla hyväksymättä AY-yhteistyöyhdistyksiä.
The proposal for change is that the student union did not approve these associations. So then we wouldn't have any cooperative associations.
Yhdistysohjesäännön 8. pykälässä määrätään. Onko tämä kaikille nyt selkeä tämä meidän äänestyksen
Is this
asetelma?
clear?
Eli sininen on nyt niin kuin aina perinteisesti niin hallituksen pohjan mukainen, eli meille hyväksytään
The template is according to the board's template, so that the template is blue, Fielman's change is red, and empty is white.
Onko kysyttävää? Hienoa.
Any questions? Amazing.
Ja varmaan voidaan tässä välissä sitten tehdä myös semmoinen, että
we may of course at this stage
keskustelu myös tässä välissä.
Disclose the discussion at this stage.
Äänestämään, eli laput
Moving on to
niin, että
vote.
kaikki kerralla ylös, ja sitten jos näyttää tasaiselta, niin mä kutsun taas.
If it looks very even, we'll have the vote counters if this vote looks to be a tough one.
Hienoa, laput ylös nyt.
Placards up now.
Mainiota, se on varsin selkeä, eli meillä on
It's a clear majority. We have a few red, a few white, and almost everything else is blue, so
ohjeistuksen mukaan mennään. Edustajisto päätti hyväksyä AY:n yhteistyöyhdistyksen seuraavat 4 järjestöä.
AYYE decided to approve according to the motion. The Representative Council decided to accept the following 4 associations as AYYE's cooperative associations: Aalto University Business Students, Tokyo Proban Teknologföreningen. Closing item 10, moving on to item 11, other business.
Joo, kiitos, hyvä huomio. Muut esille tulevat
Thank you.
asiat. Ja tässä kohtaa voidaan tosiaan
So, other business, we may at this stage take
hyvä väki takaisin saliin.
the people back into the room.
Onko sinulla tähän seuraavaan? Joo. Hienoa. Eli kohta 11 muut esille tulevat asiat.
Item other business.
Onko muita esille tulevia asioita? Ja
other business. Thank you. 2 things for this item that the board could maybe send a query to HSL that students could get a student discount for tickets even though if they don't have a smartphone, and AYYE could be more flexible in all the bureaucracy. Hope that we won't end up in a situation where we have these regulations that these people can do these things and no other people can do things. This, for example, getting keys to single rental spaces. So if an individual forgets the item to or things, that there would be a person who could help in this situation. The person in charge or in question should be able to help. Currently, the situation is that only the service office can give this assistance during its opening hours. This need might be during the weekend or more broad. This pertains to AYY's activities that give people the opportunity to do and help and develop our systems without too strict frameworks. Thank you. Next request. Kainulainen.
Ja tosiaan muita puheenvuoroja voi edelleen pyytää.
Kainulainen Kyltärengas.
Kainulainen Kyltärengas.
Viikon tuoksinnassa kiinnitin huomiota siihen, että
with the orientation week, I took note of the fact that we use in communications, we use fuksi, which is freshman. We would like to change this that we could, if we use freshman, we should use the term mursu, aka walrus. It is an official word in our community.
Thank you for the speeches. Any other request for floor? Apparently no, it's quite understandable since we'd have quite a long week already. Yes, closing item 11, move item 12, closing of the meeting. It's 2025, closing the meeting. Thank you.
Vielä sellainen, että siis epäviralliset tai mitkä vaan jatkot Fat Lizardissa.
And also our unofficial after party at Fat Lizard. So let's just go there. Unfortunately, it's the only bar here in Otaniemi that's open. Only on Mondays.
Fat Lizardissa jatkot, jos
yes.
ketkä haluaa. Tervetuloa.